Trust is fragile. When broken, it leaves lasting scars. Today we delve into the chilling case of James Bubb, a man who wore the badge of a special constable and used that authority to manipulate and abuse those who trusted him most. This is a story of power, grooming, and betrayal. James, just 21 at the time, presented himself as trustworthy, respectable, a volunteer special constable. But behind the uniform was a predator. As a child, he was adopted when he was still very young, but his childhood was far from easy. After finishing his A-levels, he studied stage management at drama school and started training with the Met in 2020, which is the largest police service in the UK. Not getting off to a good start, knowing why we're here, right? But anyway, his first victim was only 12 years old. She met him online in 2018 on Omegle. Within a span of a month or so, their communication turned sexual. What should have been a casual chat turned into a grooming ground for manipulation. Months later, they met at a Christian festival called Soul Survivor Festival, a place meant for joy and community. He was volunteering as a staff member, and she was with her family wearing a color-coded child's wristband that was obviously meant to show that she was just a child. That night, for this young girl, became the beginning of a nightmare. She, only 12 at the time, was clearly shy and was just trying things out, having the boyfriend experience. But he kept texting her that he was going to have sex with her no matter what. She said she didn't want to, but he texted her via Snapchat, "You don't have a choice," which ultimately led to telling her, air quotes, teasingly, that he was gonna rape her anyway. She was sleeping in a tent at the festival with this creep lurking around. James sexually assaulted her publicly and escalated his control, boasting of his police authority and using physical violence like choking and punching to dominate her. Over time, the grooming and abuse extended into her late teens. He assaulted her on multiple occasions between the ages of 12 and 18, one of which took place 1 year after the festival when they met up in a park in London. He groped her forcefully through her underwear, and then forced her to perform oral sex on him in public, only stopping when a dog walker was passing by and he was forced to pull up his trousers. Now imagine being 12 and having to go through this. She was raped at the ages of 12, 13, 15, and 18, probably not having the slightest idea what was happening or why she was stuck in such a situation. Well, one of the reasons I can tell you was that James kept telling her that she wanted it, she wanted to get raped, that she enjoyed getting raped. She eventually overdosed and was hospitalized for 2.5 weeks. The betrayal was complete. The person meant to uphold the law was breaking it. James did not stop with one victim. His second victim, an adult woman, was ensnared online. James posed as a 16-year-old girl to gain trust, creating a false identity. From 2018 to 2023, he employed psychological control, coercion, and abusive BDSM tactics, ignoring consent and boundaries. Years of manipulation and abuse left her vulnerable and isolated. This was no fleeting encounter. It was a prolonged period of domination, facilitated by deceit and exploitation of trust. The second victim later testified that she was in an on-again, off-again relationship with James, and they met when she had just turned 18. But the thing was, James kept telling her how much power he had and used police training techniques on her while they were having sex, which translates into him using restraints on her. He also used a knife and moved it along her body and reenacted rape scenes with her, which, surprise, surprise, were actually her being raped. He used the knife and his words to put the fear of God in her. It was a way of controlling and showing her she had no way out. How did this predator evade detection for so long? The investigation, led by Thames Valley Police under Operation Aspect with Metropolitan Police support, revealed a horrifying pattern: grooming, sexual assault, and abuse, all enabled by his position as a special constable. James was also employed at Harrow School, a position of trust, which he lost once the investigation began. Arrested in April 2024, the evidence against him was overwhelming. But he denied everything. He said he didn't know that his first victim was underage, even though in daylight, as the victim testified, he hid her from people and was obviously not comfortable walking around with her. And let's think back to the first time he forced himself on her. She was wearing a child's bracelet pass, for God's sake. How can you miss that? James said he wanted to fulfill the fantasies of the women who had accused him of rape. About the second victim, he said, quote, "I would run the blunt end of a knife along her body. I always made it very clear that she could use her safe words. I was always acutely aware of her body language. I'm not into rape fantasies. It's not something that has ever interested me. I did not rape her. We had very clearly discussed before what the limits were." End quote. The jurors only deliberated for 6 hours and 32 minutes. The trial, held at Amersham Law Courts, concluded on August 28, 2025, with multiple convictions: rape of a child under 13, sexual activity with a child, assault by penetration, and rape of an adult. His sentencing is scheduled for December 19, 2025, at Aylesbury Crown Court. And there is another surprising piece of information coming your way. At his trial, James was addressed by the name Gwen Samuels. Why, you ask? Because by that point, James identified as a transgender woman, which makes the psychological aspect of this case very bizarre and confusing. What made James/Gwen so dangerous? Experts highlight 4 key factors. Number 1, exploitation of vulnerability. He targeted individuals in emotionally vulnerable states. Number 2, authority as a weapon. His badge lent him credibility, allowing intimidation and control. Number 3, grooming and manipulation. From online messages to physical violence, he created dependence and fear. Number 4, abuse of trust. He exploited both online anonymity and real-world authority, making him difficult to challenge. Let's take a brief look at the psychological aspect here. He was adopted at a young age, and those early years were marked by instability. Later on, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and at different times, doctors also noted depression and gender dysphoria. Now, on the surface, that might sound like a vulnerable individual searching for identity, but when you look closer at his behavior, a much darker picture emerges. James used grooming tactics, finding victims online, building trust, and then violating it in the most predatory ways. He didn't just manipulate emotionally, he actually used skills from his police volunteer training, things like compliance holds and restraint techniques, against children. That's chilling. Psychologically, what stands out is his ability to compartmentalize. On one side, he claimed to feel unsafe in his own body and identified as a transgender woman. On the other, he weaponized the very parts of himself he claimed to struggle with. That contradiction, presenting himself as vulnerable while simultaneously exerting power and control, suggests traits we often see in manipulative personalities: narcissism, lack of empathy, and a deep need for dominance. Now, some people ask, how can someone who identifies as a woman behave in such a misogynistic, violent way toward women and girls? The truth is, gender identity doesn't automatically erase misogyny. If someone has internalized anger, shame, or even self-hatred, those emotions can get projected outward. In James's case, it seems like his identity struggles coexisted with an abusive drive for control. That doesn't mean his gender dysphoria was fake, but it does mean that his crimes were driven by something much darker than just identity conflict. So when we put this together, we see a profile of a man, or rather a person, shaped by early trauma, struggling with identity, but above all, exhibiting manipulative, predatory, and deeply misogynistic behavior. And that's the part we can't lose sight of. Whatever he called himself, his actions left real victims, and those actions speak louder than any label. Predators are not always strangers in the dark. Sometimes they are those entrusted with protection. The impact of James's crimes ripples far beyond the courtroom. Both victims endured years of manipulation, fear, and trauma. Their courage in coming forward helped secure justice, but the scars remain. Authorities continue to urge anyone with information or potential victims to come forward. This case also raises questions about oversight. How do we prevent abuse within institutions? How do we protect vulnerable individuals? And how do we ensure authority is never weaponized? Gwen Samuels, James Bubb, betrayed trust in the most fundamental ways. He reminds us that evil can hide behind respectable facades and that vigilance, awareness, and courage are our defenses. If you or someone you know has been affected by sexual abuse or grooming, help is available. You are not alone. Please leave any theories or comments you might have for us down below. We're really interested to know what you think about this case.